True revelation comes only to the still. In a world where noise is endless and motion never ceases, we have been conditioned to associate truth with volume, power with shouting, and guidance with external signs. But the greatest truths, the revelations that transform the course of a life or a nation, do not arrive through thunder or flashing lights. They arrive in stillness. Not the kind of stillness that merely reflects an absence of movement, but a deeper stillness, one that is cultivated, intentional, and powerful. When the heart is still, it becomes capable of perceiving what the eyes cannot see and what the ears cannot hear. On July 10th, 2025, something was revealed that broke the silence of heaven, and it did not break it with sound. It broke it by entering the soul of the one who was prepared. But that preparation did not come from studying books or debating theology. It came from silence. The silence that you practice each morning before the world awakens. The silence that you choose in the face of provocation. The silence that comes when you stop trying to control everything and simply listen. In that space, truth makes its dwelling. Most people seek revelation through extremes, through crises or miracles, through ecstatic experiences or emotional highs. Now to call it December, December is mystical. Mystical is heaven, through ecstatic experiences or emotional highs. It's a time to pray. This is the time to consider through ecstatic experiences or miracles, through ecstatic experiences. But true revelation is not interested in impressing the senses. It waits for the one who has learned to observe his own breath, to sit without distraction, to listen without needing to respond. When heaven speaks, it speaks in the language of eternity, and that language can only be understood by a mind that is not racing. The noise of the mind is like a storm on the ocean, churning, chaotic, and endless. Nashen, nashen, nashen. Directing the mind to select and correct. When the mind is to rest, it has to choose, but when the storm settles, the surface becomes calm, and only then does the reflection appear. So it is with the soul. When the noise is silenced, the truth appears, not as a dramatic voice, but as a knowing, deep and unmistakable. The revelation of July 10 was not meant to dazzle. It was meant to awaken. And awakening never happens in haste. The modern mind is addicted to urgency. But truth does not run. It waits. It waits for the one who will stop, who will kneel inwardly, who will surrender his need to control and simply ask, what must I become to receive what is already being spoken? There is no forcing revelation. You cannot storm the gates of heaven with anxiety and expect clarity. You must lower the volume of the world inside you. You must walk a path of stillness, so disciplined that even your breath becomes a prayer. And yet this stillness is not passivity, it is not laziness or apathy, it is a stillness forged in fire. To be still is to become powerful enough to be unmoved by the noise of the world. It is to carry peace in the midst of conflict, to hear truth when the world is drowning in opinion. When heaven broke its silence, it did not send a command. It sent an invitation. And that invitation was only received by those who had prepared their hearts like a garden. Once I realized that heaven was not an obsolete ocean, that it did not send a command, sent an invitation. And that invitation was only received by those who had prepared their hearts like a garden. And that invitation was only received by those who had prepared their hearts like a garden. Soil does not bear fruit simply because it exists. It bears fruit because it has been tilled, broken, watered, and prepared. The soul is no different. A revelation may be spoken from above, but it is only planted in the one who has made himself ready. And readiness looks like stillness. There are many who read, who study, who preach, but very few who sit long enough to hear. Very few who withdraw from the noise long enough to feel what is beyond emotion. There are many who consider life boring, but for them, life is boring. There are many who consider life boring, but for them, life is boring. Very few who withdraw from the noise long enough to feel what is beyond emotion. Revelation does not come to the hurried. It does not enter the house of the divided. On July 10, something was unsealed. Not for the curious, but for the devoted. Not for the restless, but for the disciplined. And what was unsealed was not a new instruction, but an ancient voice. A voice that has always been speaking, but had not been heard. Because to hear requires more than ears. It requires surrender. And for you, stillness is not a weakness. It is the furnace in which strength is born. To be still is to be undistracted, undisturbed, and unshaken. It is to know that what is true does not beg to be heard. It simply is. And when you become still, you tune your soul to that frequency. You begin to see patterns in chaos. You begin to recognize truth without argument. You begin to hear the whisper beneath the storm. Heaven does not compete with the world's noise. It waits for the one who will rise early and sit in silence, who will turn off the voices of distraction, who will not be seduced by entertainment, but will instead train his spirit to listen. When that happens, revelation becomes inevitable. There is a mountain within every person, a place above the clouds of confusion, above the weather of circumstance. But to climb that mountain requires silence. Not just external silence, but inner silence. You must lay down your weapons, your justifications, your fears, and simply be. The higher you climb, the more the noise falls away, until finally you stand where the air is clear, and in that clarity, revelation arrives. Not as a lightning bolt, but as the sun slowly rising. The light was always there, but now you are high enough to see it. On that sacred day, July 10, a revelation descended. It did not shake the earth, but it shook the hearts of the still. It did not announce itself with spectacle, but it unveiled itself to those who had learned to wait without complaint. In a world obsessed with speed, true revelation waits to be found by the slow. In a world obsessed with volume, truth is found in silence. And in a world obsessed with doing, the deepest power is discovered in being. True revelation comes only to the still, not the silent by nature, but the still by choice. The ones who fight daily to quiet their thoughts, to subdue their desires, to focus their attention. This is the inner temple. This is the holy ground where heaven speaks. And now that it has spoken, it is not to be debated, it is to be lived. Stillness is the door, discipline is the key, the message has been delivered, but only the still will carry it. What is heard in silence must be lived in discipline. Revelation is not merely a gift to be admired. It is a burden to be carried with reverence. The moment something sacred is received, It demands a transformation. The world is full of those who hear and applaud, who are moved for a moment, who speak of awakening and insight, yet their steps remain unchanged. Their eyes may weep, their voices may tremble, but when the sun rises, they return to their habits, their comforts, their distractions. To receive something from beyond veil is not a call to inspiration. It is a call to alignment. That which heaven speaks cannot remain in the air. It must take root in the bones, in the choices, in the path a person walks when no one is watching. The discipline of embodying what was revealed is the true evidence that one has heard correctly. The discipline of embodying what was revealed is the true evidence that one has heard correctly. Without discipline, revelation becomes memory. But with discipline, it becomes alive. Discipline is not punishment. It is the structure in which truth can dwell. It is the repetition of alignment, the daily return to the center, the constant shaping of the outer life to match the inner realization. On July 10, 2025, something was unsealed. But the unsealing is not enough. The clay must now be shaped. The tree must be pruned, the fire must be tended. A person who receives revelation and then returns to disorder is like one who builds a temple and never enters it. What has been given must be guarded, what has been shown must be protected from decay. And that protection is called discipline. Discipline begins in the smallest places. In how you rise, in how you breathe, in how you speak when irritated, in how you train your body not for beauty but for presence. It begins with what you allow into your mind, what you feed your spirit, and how you use your time. The moment a divine message enters a life, that life must become a vessel. A vessel is not shaped by emotion, it is shaped by devotion. And devotion does not visit once a week. Devotion wakes up early. Devotion turns away from what is easy. Devotion remains steady when others quit. To live what is heard in silence is to rearrange your entire being around what was shown in the stillness. It is not enough to remember the revelation. It must be practiced until it becomes reflex. Discipline is the bridge between hearing and becoming. Many hear, few become. The reason is not mystery, it is commitment. When one begins to walk the path of discipline, resistance will rise. The body will resist, the mind will argue, the world will tempt, the revelation may feel distant, the fire may flicker, but it is precisely in those moments that discipline proves itself. To walk even when you do not feel like walking, to repeat even when you are weary, to speak truth even when you are misunderstood. That is when the seed becomes a tree. That is when the echo becomes a voice. That is when the message given from heaven becomes a transformation seen on earth. The revelation of July 10 was never meant to entertain. It was not for curiosity. It was a call to order. Not the order imposed by institutions, but the order that arises from a soul in harmony. And harmony requires tuning. Just as a string must be tightened to produce the right sound, so the soul must be brought into tension with truth. That tension is discipline. Without it, the sound is dull. With it, the music of heaven can be heard in every action, every word, every breath. The one who disciplines his life becomes the instrument through which the revelation continues to speak. To live what is heard requires courage. It is far easier to talk of awakening than to rise before dawn. Far easier to agree with wisdom than to obey it. The true disciple is not known by words, but by patterns. fancy word. What do they do daily? How do they respond under pressure? Where do their feet go when no one is leading them? These are the signs that the revelation has found a home. Discipline creates integrity, not perfection, but alignment. The outside matches the inside. The heart does not carry what the hands deny. The speech does not betray what the spirit has seen. There is unity. And that unity is the evidence that what was heard in silence has become life. Revelation is like fire. It brings warmth, but it also consumes. It burns away pretense. It destroys distraction. It demands space. And when it arrives, it will make war with everything in your life that does not belong. Discipline is the sword with which you fight that war. Each day, each hour, you are choosing whether to make room for what was revealed or to crowd it out with noise. Every act of discipline is a declaration: I will not forget. I will not return to sleep. I will not waste what was given. To receive revelation and remain the same is to betray the gift. But to live it out, especially when it is hard, especially when it costs you, is to honor the giver. The world does not need more messages. It needs more embodiments. People whose eyes reveal what they have seen in silence. People whose actions do not contradict their insights. People who build lives that echo heaven's voice. Discipline is not glamorous. It is quiet, repetitive, uncelebrated. But it is through that very quiet repetition that eternity takes shape in time. The path is narrow, the climb is steep, but the summit cannot be reached by accident. It must be walked with intention. And every step of that intention is discipline. On July 10, something was spoken into the atmosphere of this world. The day is planted. The day is planted. The day is planted. Not through sound but through spirit. Not for all but for those who are willing to live different. That message now rests in the hearts of those who have ears to hear and the will to respond. Their lives are becoming temples. Their choices are becoming offerings. Their discipline is becoming testimony. What was unsealed in that sacred silence will not fade. It will grow, it will spread, but only through those who live it, breathe it, protect it. And temporarily, it will fight its own battle with the sacred silence. Will grow, it will spread, but only through those who live it, breathe it. But only through those who live it, breathe it. But only through those who live it. The noise of the world will try to drown it. The rush of days will try to bury it. But the disciplined will remain steady. They will rise and rise again. And through them, the revelation will continue to speak. Not through words alone, but through presence. What is heard in silence must be lived in discipline. Only then does revelation become transformation. Only then does the silence of heaven become the roar of truth on earth.